Manchester City's alleged breaches of FFP, 115 charges against them. That's a number we've heard a lot because this has been rumbling on. But we now have a date set, or rather a month set, for when this hearing will take place. We're hearing it will be September. David, I'll start with you. Given how long that this has gone on, just how significant is it that we now appear to have a timeline in place?
Yeah, I think it's really good for football supporters, for the Premier League, because it's a bit of a stain against the competition that this has been running for so long. The investigation has been going since, 2019 or something. The allegations, 2009 to 2018 are the time span. I presume some people following football weren't even born at that point. And we're getting to a stage now that if there's no resolution, it's going to undermine even further the credibility of the competition, the product, the trust of the public and the fans in what we're watching. Now, we knew it was going to be coming in the autumn. We thought around October, November time. The latest reports suggest September. Of course, that could always be pushed back because of legal wrangling. And then there will be the hearing, and then there will be conversations afterwards, deliberations. The panel are going to have to write up their report, suggestions it will go into at the very least early 2025 until we hear an outcome. That could still be subject to challenge and appeals. And that wouldn't surprise you, given how vigorously Manchester City have fought this situation until now. We all remember that day in February of 2023, was it, or 2022, when the charges were laid down, 115. Latest round of reports suggest that that's actually been amended to 130 charges. That was a report by Martin Ziegler in The Times. The Premier League aren't commenting on that. They're keeping their cards very close to their chest on this. But now, yeah, we at least have a time, a sort of fork in the road in when we could have some kind of clarity on what's going to happen here. And given all of the issues around financial fair play, profitability and sustainability, the words that we seem to be talking about more than ever now, and we're looking at Everton and Nottingham Forest, even Chelsea being considered, all clubs now understanding that these financial rules have teeth. The question you get asked as a journalist every time you post a story on this subject or talk about it is, what about Manchester City? Well, we shouldn't be too far away from finding out.
Matt, I think David makes a really interesting point there. How pleased do you think the Premier League will be? Because, as he says, they've faced so many questions, given how swiftly you'd imagine they acted with the likes of Everton and Nottingham Forest. How pleased do you think the Premier League will be that finally there is something they can say to fans in respect of, listen, this hearing will be taking place. It could drag on quite long, but at least there is that timeline there.
I think they'll be pleased to have a date in the diary. I believe September the 16th has been penciled in for the start point for a 10-week hearing. So the Premier League will be pleased by that. They can't really speak to the fans or even their own clubs about this at all. That's part of the problem, and it's a huge part of the reason why they've been so widely criticised, just because of the legal implications. They cannot say anything. They don't even brief journalists anonymously on this. It's very, very hard to get any information, which is why, as David says, so many people keep asking about it, because there is an information vacuum about this. I think it might just be worth spelling out the scale of this thing, because it's often compared to Everton and Forest, but it's in a different stratosphere, both in terms of what City are accused of and therefore the potential implications. Everyone has the number 115 in their heads, which might now be increased to 150, as David has says. But in terms of what they've been charged with, it's probably worth going through the charges. The charges, I've got them here. 54 failures to provide accurate financial information, 14 failures to provide accurate details of player and manager salaries, Roberto Mancini, the manager involved, 5 breaches of UEFA's FFP rules, 7 breaches of the Premier League's PSR rules, and then 35 failures to cooperate. I mean, it's just huge. Everton been docked 10 points and then 2 points for single breaches of PSR. City are accused of 7 breaches of PSR alone, as well as all the rest. So if they're found guilty of a fraction of the allegations against them, the punishment is almost limitless.
I mean, David, when Matt spells it out like that, it does sound very ominous for Manchester City. They will attack this with lawyers, they will come back, as you've said, there will be appeals, you would imagine. But is there any way to predict just how strong this punishment could be for Manchester City?
No, I think we'd be guessing and speculating. I don't think that's responsible in this case, because Manchester City have insisted throughout that they are innocent, that they have irrefutable evidence to prove that innocence. They are convinced that they will come out on top in this, and so their supporters. We didn't say who this would also be good for. Manchester City and their supporters will feel this is an opportunity finally to be vindicated and to have this stigma lifted from above their heads. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But the size and the scale and the magnitude that Matt talks about there, a couple of things I wanted to add. A lot of the alleged offences, are repeat. So that's helped inflate the number, because many people say, wow, 115 separate charges. That's not the case. Because of the time span, it's often, in many of those that Matt lays out, year after year of the same thing, including non-compliance and alleged inflating of sponsorships artificially with the help of their ownership being disguised, and so on. There's another thing in this that the charges that have been faced by Everton, Nottingham Forest are described informally as like simple PSR cases, whereas Manchester City is defined as being more complex, as Matt explains. So when people are getting understandably frustrated and concerned and angry about the delays here and suggesting there is an agenda against their clubs and in favour of Manchester City, and why are you letting them go? They're not. They're completely different cases, completely different charges, completely different time eras. And there will be an unbelievably vigorous defence from Manchester City. Sort of some of the best lawyers in the industry. Lord Panic is among those leading their charge, the KC, who's quite renowned. We're not undermining the legal force that, say, Everton and Nottingham Forest, and maybe Chelsea, if it ever comes to them too, will have on their side. But Manchester City have already proved with UEFA that they can defend themselves, and ultimately the ban that they were handed for European competition was lifted, and they will feel vindicated by that process, and they'll be adamant that they can do so again.
Just on this, in terms of, in a more broader sense, Matt, as well, do you feel that this is an isolated case towards Manchester City in terms of what they've been alleged of doing, or is there any sense that we could find that this is similar with some other clubs as well, especially during that period that's being looked at, 2009 to 2018?
Well, there is another case that is ongoing regarding Chelsea in a similar period. It doesn't relate to FFP, PSR breaches as such, but it is. They're accused of failing to disclose all of their transfer payments. The allegations have been reported in the Dutch media and then consequently over here about hidden payments made to Eden Hazard's agent. The Premier League are investigating that. They've yet to charge them, but if they do charge them, then they could be facing similar issues. One complication is that was, of course, under the previous ownership at Chelsea when the club was owned by Roman Abramovich. Ironically, the new Chelsea regime, led by Todd Boehly and Behdad Eghbali, they self-reported these alleged offences to the Premier League. So they effectively handed themselves in to the authorities, but could still, of course, be punished for it because it's different ownership, but it's the same club, and they will have benefited indirectly in terms of the value of the club from the success of Chelsea under Abramovich. So it's all incredibly complicated, and there's another case we follow with interest.
I just wanted to add something because I didn't actually answer your question, Ollie, about the potential punishment because I didn't want to speculate. But as per the rules, and you would have seen this when Martin Ziegler did the most recent story and others have reported throughout, there's a whole range of punishments available to the authorities, and the worst of them being, I guess, relegation from the Premier League. That's what everybody's talked about. And they see the punishments that have been dished out in terms of points penalties to Everton, Nottingham Forest, and they kind of extrapolate that to guarantee that Manchester City will be thrown out of the Premier League, thrown out of football altogether, fined, transfer bans and embargoes. The truth is we don't know. We don't even know if they will be found guilty. And so that's why we're not at that point. And similar, if the Chelsea case comes in whatever shape or form, there will be ranges of options available. There's also a case just before we even get to the Manchester City FFP PSR case. And that's something that's been happening at this very moment in time related to a case that Manchester City have brought against the Premier League, challenging their rules on associated party transactions and who you can do sponsorship deals with, essentially, and saying that they're unlawful, they're an unfair restriction on trade. If they're successful with that, and there are rumours that they've at least been successful with some of the sort of case, then that could have an impact on the big case that's coming, because it could set some sort of a precedent if the clubs, or Manchester City in this case, succeed in proving what they're trying to prove on transactions between related parties, then that is essentially, in a certain way, what they've been accused of in these 115, 130 charges. So they could take the result of that and use it in their favour, in their mind, when it comes to the big one. So maybe fewer people are paying attention to what's happening right now, and we should hear an outcome relatively soon. But that is almost the precursor for what's to come to an extent.